brutal attack has happened before there. Gannon is in the house in the suitcase. It has all been recently covered up. She's there with her daughter. She's there with Lena. And she's acting and presenting herself to these police, laughing, joking, being incredibly friendly just after this has happened. Because at that point in time, she has disassociated the horrible act that she has committed. There's no other logical explanation for how that she is doing that. And when you go back and look at these timelines, ladies and gentlemen, look and go through them, what is really important during this whole time is not sleeping at all. For the whole time here that this is all going on, you see activity going on her phone or things that she's doing all through the night. She is in a manic situation and her mind is not working. Again, we heard Dr. Lewis talk about irrational things that she is doing that doesn't make any sense. Ladies and gentlemen, it makes no sense for somebody who is pre-planned for whatever reason, whatever motive, to brutally kill Gannon, to then report him missing right away, and then in a matter of 3 days later, go into the police with a completely illogical, incoherent story. You heard different witnesses. Miss Stout was an intelligent, above average intelligence woman, a smart woman, everything like that. To go in only 2 days later and sit down with the police and come up with the ridiculous story of Eduardo is not the actions of a sane, rational person. It is irrational belief. Even children know. If you keep saying different stories, you're not going to be believed. Even looking back at the little boy who cried wolf, which we teach children, if you keep making up things, then you're not going to believe. She changes her story, not only completely different, not only with no explanation as to really why she had made up the prior story to one that she is changing now, but comes up with this ridiculous thing that she met this Eduardo, that he was just going to come over and fix the carpet for free. She's not even planning on paying him. That somehow he is in the garage when they get there, that he then takes her down into the basement and rapes her for an hour, and that he takes Gannon in a suitcase and leads out of the home. That are not the actions of somebody who is sane and logical. That is completely irrational to believe that that kind of thing could possibly be believed. Her actions, I would say, continue to be irrational. She keeps changing her story. She keeps giving different accounts. Gannon is placed in the suitcase, driven all the way to Florida. She goes through Louisiana. She goes through all kinds of East Texas, all kinds of places where people are not around, deserted areas, long areas of desolation, many places where that suitcase could have been hidden and never been found. And she goes all the way to Pensacola, Florida, and drops it off at a dry space under a bridge right near a major city. That's not the actions of somebody who is rational, who is trying to hide that away. She then goes to South Carolina, and you can look at the Google searches that she performs in South Carolina. Face transplant near me. Like she's Googling for a McDonald's or a restaurant that's very close to her, that she's going to pop up, that she's going to go over there and get an entire face plant to change the way she looks. Those are not the actions of a sane and rational person. Those are the actions of somebody that is delusional. Ladies and gentlemen, I would say all of these pretext phone calls with Al are the actions of somebody who is delusional. Listen, go back and listen. Listen to those February 14th phone calls between her and Al. Listen to how her voice and tenor changes between phone calls. Listen to how her emotions switch rapidly during the phone calls with Al. and her stories switch rapidly that no sane, rational persons of overintelligence could possibly expect anybody to believe. She is freaking out, and she is delusional in the thought that anybody is going to believe all the different variations that she's trying to sell them. None of that is rational. None of that makes sense.
She's not insane.
And so again, what then we're brought back to is why. What was going on? What preceded this? And looking, it's going to end up in the mental health experts. And I want to talk a little bit about Dr. Lewis. She is 85 years old. She has been doing research, treating, evaluating people with serious mental illness for over 60 years. She is one of the foremost experts in the country on dissociative identity disorder. She has been published in peer-reviewed journals well over 100 times. Things that educates other psychiatrists and things that educates other doctors, she has authored and produced. She has done, she has the HBO documentary. They don't go just to quacks to do an HBO documentary. They went and they did a documentary on her because she was groundbreaking in her field. Has she consulted on other stuff with Robert De Niro and so forth? Yes. Not because she's a quack, because she has explored and she knows more about this subject than almost anybody else in the country. Has she, in her age, some of the details, the minute things in the discovery get lost a little bit in her memory? They do. And you saw that up on the stand when she was testifying, and I'm not disputing that. But what she has is the decades and decades of experience with this, the decades and decades of dealing with people with severe mental illness who commit heinous acts. She has that experience to rely upon, and she had 14 hours of interviews with Ms. Stout to talk with her, to base her opinion. She had notes from family members, other types of things to show this, and in her expert opinion, is legally insane. She wanted the EEG and the MRI to possibly know if there was also organic brain damage going on here. There's some type of brain trauma that was contributing to the mental illness of Ms. Stout. But what you heard at the end is she did not need those type of things to make the diagnosis of dissociative identity disorder, which she was confident on and she believes upon. Ladies and gentlemen, I would ask you, do not discount her decades of experience. Do not discount her expertise. Okay? The acting that a woman who has pioneered this, a woman who has made her life on this, a woman who has been peer reviewed over hundreds of times in different articles on this subject, is willing to throw that all away to come down here at a substantially reduced fee to testify is ludicrous and it's insulting. They pay their experts just the same as we do, okay? And that's why I asked their blood spatter expert, his fees. It wasn't acting like there was anything wrong with that. It's just to show both sides hire experts, both sides pay experts. Just because the expert isn't getting paid doesn't mean that they are money-grubbing liars, okay? Experts in this type of thing, to come and testify, they charge money, they charge a fee. She actually reduced her normal fee to come down and to help with Ms. Stout and to do this evaluation. And what did she tell you, ladies and gentlemen? Ms. Stout, of all the hundreds and hundreds of different mentally ill people that she has ever dealt with, is one of the most mentally ill persons that she's ever dealt with. And what else is she saying? I think this is key. Pay very close attention. She's not endorsing that it was definitely Maria that did this. She's not endorsing how Maria is saying this happened. What is she saying? Ms. Stout has, in her opinion, more than likely disassociated the memory of the homicide because she can't bear to deal with it. That was actually a very good question by Mr. Young on it, and I think there's a lot of validity to that. Ms. Stout accepting the idea that she committed this brutal, horrible homicide in the manner that was done, smashing that 11-year-old's head in, and not deal with it. To accept that fact in her mind would crush her, would crush her soul, would crush her identity. And so she has come up with all of these delusional fantasies, trying to come up with some other thing that may have happened. And listen to her voice, listen to the tenor when she's describing that. When she's hoping, when she's talking to Dr. Lewis, I can't remember if it's Dr. Lewis or Dr. Torres, about the different versions she's given, that she was coming up into her mind, hoping and believing it was somebody other than her who did this. The facts, ladies, and we're not disputing that, ladies and gentlemen, it was her. But she was not in her right mind when she did it. And you heard Dr. Lewis state that. And you can look at the evidence and you can look at the other things that go around to realize that is the only reasonable, rational conclusion as to how this horrible thing happened, was a psychotic break. Dakota Lowry, when he finally realized that his older half-sister actually did this, the first thing that came into his mind, based upon what he knew of his half-sister, was there had to be some type of psychotic break that had happened. That there could be no other explanation as to why it did it, and those are people that knew her and that have grown up with her. I also want to talk a lot, or some, about Dr. Torres. And it is what is important, ladies and gentlemen, to know with both Dr. Torres, Dr. Gray, and Dr. Grimmett, is none of the experts that you have heard from that did any type of evaluation think that there's no mental illness going on here. Okay? They all agree there's some type of mental illness. They just disagree over what to call that mental illness. We have Grimmett and Torres and Gray diagnosing her with borderline personality disorder, which is a significant mental illness, which, as you said, comes from right on the border between full-blown psychosis and a neurosis. Okay, it's the most serious of all the personality disorder, and it's so serious because there are such prominent features of psychosis that go along with it. Psychosis where people hallucinate, psychosis where people become delusional, psychosis where people stop becoming irrational. All of that stuff can come and go in people with borderline personality disorder. And it comes and goes according to DSM-5, according to Dr. Torres, according to Dr. Grimmett, when people with borderline personality disorder start to experience high stress. That is why Dr. Niederhauser was important. It was not because Dr. Niederhauser made any type of diagnosis or anything with that, but she came to Dr. Niederhauser because he was experiencing high stress and high anxiety that was causing her to be unable to perform at work. The stress and all of that was mounting. You can look at her Google searches. The Google searches leading up to this. For whatever reason, her stress in life was becoming overwhelming. She felt underappreciated. She felt like running away. She felt like leaving. She felt like this was all too much on her plate, that there was nobody there to help her. And you heard from Dr. Torres about how people with borderline personality disorder feel stress much different than everybody else. Things that would not be normal stressors for all of us can become extremely stressful for somebody with borderline personality disorder. And the other thing that was important that Dr. Torres, we talked about quite a bit, is it is a lot of the same things, the same type of horrible childhood trauma, the type of trauma where you have one parent who is molesting you and another parent who won't do a damn thing about it, that can cause either dissociative identity disorder or borderline personality disorder. They both come from the exact same of environment that Dr. Torres said Ms. Stout grew up in. That type of environment is what can cause people to have borderline personality disorder, which then under periods of stress and anxiety can become psychotic.